have not broken your heart. You have broken it. And in breaking it, you've broken mine.
Sure about that? You sure about that? You sure about that?
So I watched Wuthering Heights, and people seem to be divided between two groups. The ones who loved it and the ones who hated it. And based on the title of this video, you may already assume on which side I am. And if you click on this video, I already assume on which side you are. I actually didn't have the intention to watch this movie, or at least the intention to pay for it, if you know what I mean. Because I knew there was a lot of backlash based on the casting, the plot, and the whole framing of the movie. I personally disliked the way both the press around it and the story were handled by the director and the team of producers behind it, and I decided to vote with my wallet and not watch it. However, my cousin decided to take me to the movies, and at the risk of hurting her feelings, and since I couldn't be completely honest with her about the fact that I didn't really like the movie she invited me to, I decided to come here and tell you what I think of this adaptation of Wuthering Heights. To be completely honest with you, I haven't read the book. Although I have it at home because I received it as a birthday present from another friend years ago. But as I heard another YouTube creator say, a good adaptation of a book doesn't require you to read the book to understand it or appreciate it as a movie. Knowing the story and comparing it to what's on screen just gives you an added value but shouldn't be mandatory to enjoy it. So I can only imagine the disappointment of avid readers of this book when the Wuthering Heights casting was announced. Margot Robbie in the role of Catherine Earnshaw, and the most polemic one, Emerald Fennell favorite boy of the moment, Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff. Both characters were completely miscast since first, Heathcliff was described as dark-skinned and gypsy-like, and second, they were both supposed to be around 18 to 20 years old when the main arc of the movie happens. And even though the casting of Jacob Elordi was heavily controversial, I believe their age plays an important part on why this movie doesn't work, but I will explain that later. From the very moment the movie was announced, people were trying to stay hopeful and looking for a way to understand or reframe the way this casting was done. Maybe this was a fantasy of one of the characters. Maybe this was a story within a story. Or maybe, and this was my initially hopeful theory, the casting of Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie was an initial bait to get people to watch the movie with other lesser known but properly casted protagonists. But as it has been proven in recent years, the public has more creative ideas and are more respectful to the source material and the universe these pieces have been created in than the producers and directors that just use them as bait. It was true for Euphoria Season 2, it was true for the last season of Stranger Things, and it is true for Wuthering Heights as well. So here's what I think of the 2026 adaptation of Wuthering Heights. And yes, I'm aware that this is not a faithful adaptation because the quotation marks are on the title, but this doesn't excuse the many issues I saw in this film. As I have mentioned at the beginning of this video, the most glaring problem when it comes to this movie is the casting in general. And I have to say that despite how much talent is involved in this movie, it couldn't save the final result, even when we think about it detached from the source material. Let's start with Heathcliff. As it's explained in the book, Heathcliff was supposed to be dark-skinned, which in the context of the story, the treatment that he received because of it was supposed to be the main drive for his bitterness and desire for revenge, as well as his all-consuming attachment to Cathy. Heathcliff was treated poorly by everyone around him because of what his appearance represented in the society he was brought up in. He was always going to be perceived as inferior by most people, but especially by Hindley, Cathy's cruel brother who was resentful of him and who was conveniently erased from this story too. These occasional jabs and mistreatment was going to create a growing sense of inferiority that was only going to be calmed by Cathy's presence. And this is why Jacob Elordi's casting as Heathcliff was so puzzling, because first of all, we barely see any of the mistreatment caused by his otherness. An otherness that never really lands since the main drives, like his race and Hindley, are not really there. But it also places his quote-unquote love for Cathy as his main drive to move through the film. Which, to be honest, is not enough to justify his supposed cruelty, because that's also an aspect that has been toned down in this adaptation as well. For example, in one of the pivotal scenes where we are finally faced with Heathcliff's cruelty and aggressiveness, the scene where he gets into Isabella Linton's room and asks her to run away with him, we have a complete reinterpretation that completely takes away the main core of who he really is. We were supposed to have a Heathcliff that was violent, resentful, and sadistic, to the point of physically and mentally abusing Isabella so much that she had to ask for help from her brother so she could run away from Heathcliff's reign of terror. All this without mentioning that he attempted to kill Isabella's dog. Instead, we have a Heathcliff that seduced Isabella into a submission that she gladly agreed upon, and the rescue letters she was writing weren't for her to be rescued, but instead a plan for Heathcliff to trick Cathy into coming back to him. This adaptation made the very real brutality that Heathcliff was starting on Isabella into an S&M relationship that was only changed to erase the aggressive side of him. Yet again, removing any other depth and conflict from his character and just turning him into an absolute romantic with a little edge to him. Which, if you ask me, it's a complete misuse of Jacob Elordi as an actor. Because if there's anything this guy is good at, it's precisely portraying a damaged character whose wounds feed his desire for power and revenge. As we have seen, for example, with Nate Jacobs in Euphoria. He would have been a really good Heathcliff if he was allowed to use the anger that fed his character. The same way he fed his characters in Euphoria and in Elvis and in The Kissing Booth. And well, that, and obviously if he had a naturally dark complexion, because the other elephant in the room is of course his race. And this is a giant hole in his character development that is only enlarged by the history of whitewashing and misrepresentation of racialized people that has existed in cinema since forever. The deliberate and careless choice to make a tall, white Australian actor take a part meant for an actor that was singled out by his exotic appearance, an appearance that was crucial for Heathcliff's character development, was definitely the miss that drove the main controversy around this film. But since this was the biggest plot point that was changed, it was widely discussed and criticized, and with good reason. On the other hand, we have Cathy, played by Margot Robbie. I personally really like Margot Robbie as an actress. She's definitely talented and versatile and can bring to life different types of characters, like Naomi in Wolf of Wall Street, Tonya Harding in I, Tonya, or my favorite of them, Nellie Leroy in Babylon. She can do complex and cutting as well as animated and lighthearted like she did in the Barbie movie. But in this movie, I have to say that her talents weren't used well. And no, not because she had a quote-unquote iPhone face, which to be fair is not a valid criticism for someone who doesn't have an evident or distracting work done on her face. She just happens to be exceptionally beautiful by modern standards. My problem with Margot Robbie in this movie is mainly the way it was decided she would portray Cathy's willfulness, passion, and arrogance, because she did display those qualities, but in the way a clumsy teenager would. My problem is not that Margot Robbie is a 35-year-old actress that was playing a character that in the book was 18 years old, because it seems that the characters were aged out to match the casting of the main actors. My problem is that the portrayal of these intense emotions, the pride and the impulsive motivations of both Heathcliff and Cathy was shown with the maturity of a 14-year-old when they are both at least in their mid-20s in this adaptation. Margot Robbie's Cathy is juvenile, prideful, and tomboyish, but displays these qualities the way a child would. There's not much difference between Cathy as a child and as a woman before she married Linton, and it seems that her real growth has been attached to the fact that she's now a married woman instead of the natural growth that comes with age. A good comparison I'd like to make against this interpretation of Catherine will be Jo March on the 2018 Little Women adaptation. She shares some of the same qualities as Cathy, like being stubborn, passionate, and unconventional, but unlike Catherine in this adaptation, as Jo grew up, she has decided to show more restraint and composure against her younger self. I would say that even Cher Horowitz on Clueless has shown a more consistent maturity in the couple of months that movie has taken place in, compared to the 20 years that Catherine has in this adaptation to mature, and that's quite an embarrassing light to play such a complex character in. And besides the portrayal of young Catherine, we also have the portrayal of older Catherine, which is one that has also fell short. After she married Linton, Cathy has turned into a lady, but with the same shallow and impulsive qualities adapted to her new environment. Qualities that we don't see as much in the movie. Instead, what we see is an ever-longing and breathy and wimpy performance that only emphasizes how much she suffers after Heathcliff leaves her. We don't really see the ugly and devious side of Cathy as much, and instead her portrayal is one of an eternal romantic that's only waiting for her lover to come back, which takes a lot of complexity out of her, as if the director was afraid of Cathy and Heathcliff being seen as unlikable. And since we have been obligated to only focus on Cathy's and Heathcliff's in relation to each other, let's talk about that too. For a movie that has been catalogued as the ultimate love story, full of passionate scenes and a heart-wrenching ending, the main characters didn't have any palpable chemistry. Yes, they are both beautiful people who recite lines of never-ending adoration and that have passionate sex in inconvenient places, but a lot of the times they just seem like two people who like to f***, and not f*** each other, they just like to f***. And for the many years of history that they have together, they should be given a more devoted energy than the one they're giving. In the books, Mr. Earnshaw brings Heathcliff to his home when he was 7 years old and Cathy was 6. Cathy meets the Lintons at the age of 12, gets proposed to by Edgar at age 15, and after hearing the news of the proposal, a wounded Heathcliff, who was 16 at the time, decides to abandon the Earnshaws, only to come back 3 years later and continue the story. In the movies, however, their ages are increased, but the development of their characters stays stagnant. Instead of knowing each other for 9 years between Heathcliff's arrival and his departure, Cathy and Heathcliff know each other for at least 18 to 20 years, which by that time would have already fostered a more mature or at least a self-aware relationship between them. Since they have separated at 15 in the original source material, they didn't have the time to explore their sexual and emotional relationship, but both being at least 25 or 26 in the movie, it didn't make sense for them to have not had at least one sexual encounter given how strong their bond and their chemistry is. Another comparison I can add here is one of my favorite movies, Atonement, which has two characters, Robbie and Cecilia, going through a similar age in a similar situation, but given their personalities and social standing, they were just repressing feelings for one another. The thing here is that even though both Robbie and Cecilia have known each other since they were children, they weren't really that close and started to develop feelings once they grew up. Also, their chemistry on camera was powerful. Cathy and Heathcliff, being as impulsive and having the closeness they had since they were kids, had no reason to contain themselves, especially for both of them to reach their mid to late 20s and not have at least given a kiss to each other. They are both way over their developing years and they're still acting as if they need to hide their attraction for the other at an age where most people have had at least one romantic or sexual experience. They're acting innocent and unaware as if the idea of their attraction still needs to be hidden by games and jabs at each other. And this is a huge problem with their characters individually, but overall with the believability of their feelings on the film. In spite of how much passion they try to imprint in the scenes together and how much they've built their longing apart from each other, once they're together, it feels like they have taken a 15-minute break instead of the 3 to 5 years of constant pain they have felt away from each other. And I find it strange because both these actors have had amazing chemistry with other co-stars. Jacob Elordi and Kaylee Spaeny in Priscilla were definitely remarkable, as well as Margot Robbie with Ryan Gosling in Barbie or with Diego Calva in Babylon. So it's not that they can't build it, it's that they don't have it with each other. Their interactions are surface level, their words are empty, and their relationship as a whole is just passionless and shallow. And believe me, I tried to believe their love for each other and I just couldn't. Not because they're not good actors, but because since the characters were portrayed in such a surface level, why will the love scenes be any better? Because that's another thing about this movie. The way it's being sold and the final product couldn't be more different. The marketing of this story is all wrong, and not only because it took the tale of an intense, dysfunctional, and juvenile relationship and marketed as the ultimate romance, but because there are allusions that have been made by the film that make it fall flat on its face. Starting with a weird story about Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi's supposed obsession with each other, calling each other soulmates, filling out rooms with roses to impress each other, and sharing matching rings with the inscription, "Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same." A move that hasn't been convincing to the public. In fact, a lot of people accurately call this move desperate, manufactured, and fake, to the point that a lot of people have found it irritating, and some of them have mentioned that give them the ick. Whatever campaigning has been done behind the scenes to make the audience believe in this romance didn't work. Another element that caught my attention among the many things that could have been done better here is the poster and the inspiration for it. There's actually nothing wrong with the poster in particular, but it's clearly an allusion to the 1939 movie Gone with the Wind. And what I find the most interesting is the parallels between both movies and how one of them actually had the balls to give its characters personality and with it, the chance to be disliked. And for whoever hasn't seen Gone with the Wind, here goes a brief description that will include the spoilers, by the way. The movie centers the main character, Scarlett O'Hara, a willful, spoiled, manipulative, but incredibly beautiful, intelligent, and tenacious woman as she navigates her life before, during, and after the American Civil War. In this movie, we see Scarlett go through almost every hardship of war while she pines for Ashley Wilkes, a man who's married to his own cousin, Melanie Hamilton. Scarlett, blinded by her love for Ashley, frequently overlooks and rejects the advances that Rhett Butler, the male protagonist of the movie, does on her. By the end of the movie, and after a series of marriages and difficulties they have faced, she has accepted that she will never have the love of Ashley and finally accepts how much she loved Red, only to finally be left by him with one of the most famous lines in cinema history.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
And despite how I just described this movie, this is not just a movie about a passionate romance. This is a movie about resilience, love, loss, sense of belonging, survival, power, and the willpower required to thrive in difficult times. And these themes are not brought into the screen by likable characters that don't have any flaws. Both Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara are disliked by their peers, disrespectful to societal conventions, willful, selfish, and manipulative. And by any standards, we can say that they are not good people. Scarlett has used, cheated, and manipulated everyone around her to survive, and Red made huge profits out of basically being a traitor to his own people. But this recognition of the real essence and the things they did to survive and their own awareness as flawed individuals is what drives the story. Red is aware of the kind of person he is, and in Scarlett he recognizes his own flaws as well as the passion for life that they both share. A recognition that Scarlett refuses as she's doing everything to deny her own likeness to Red. They are both imperfect, headstrong, and have done questionable things, but they have other qualities that make them admirable in that despite our moral grounding, it makes us root for them. They're both selfish, egocentric, and unkind, but they can also be incredibly fierce, resilient, and ambitious. They may not be the ideal protagonists of a story, but they are definitely hard to forget. And this, I believe, is the biggest flaw with Wuthering Heights 2026. It's lukewarm and forgettable in a lot of ways. Emerald Fennell broke important rules of the book and its storytelling to fill it out with glossy moments, beautiful shots, and camera angles that are flashy and pretty, but that could have just been a pretty postcard instead of a 2-hour movie. The visual elements of the movie are only used for aesthetic value. The director focuses so much on the look of everything that she neglects the storytelling, and that's why the story and the actors' interpretations end up being so clumsy and cartoonish. She replaced a lot of the most questionable aspects of the film, but left us with a bunch of characters that have their humanity stripped out of them, and their personality quickly becomes a white canvas to project our own ideas of romance into it. She also added lifeless and slightly tame sex scenes to replace the real intimacy required to fully understand Cathy's and Heathcliff's obsession with each other. The The director took a complex and dark story about obsession, social and racial tensions, and unconventional romance, and gave us back a story about the most surface-level expression of love that's not really felt through the screen. She gave us beautiful shots, beautiful gowns, but nothing that really turns that shallow beauty into something as substantial as the source material. In interviews, she defends herself a lot by saying that she put a lot of effort on the visual aspect of the movie, and we can tell, the movie looks beautiful, but what else is there? What else is there that shows us that she, as a 40-year-old artist, has grown anything from the teenager that read Wuthering Heights at 14? And if anything, this reinterpretation of the story says a lot more about Emerald Fennell's lack of depth in herself and her craft than about the audience who very rightfully so has panned this film for what it is. So at the end of the day, what was this movie meant to be? Because in spite of how adorned is Emerald Fennell's speech about how much she appreciates the story and how much she pretends to care about it, that was not the outcome that we saw in theaters. You may have to ask, why are we allowing these people to use remarkable stories as a shield to showcase themselves at the center of the discussion? If you enjoyed this movie, good for you. But to me, it seems that a lot of substance and loyalty to the source material was sacrificed and butchered for shock value, controversy, and let's face it, personal gain. If this adaptation did anything good, it's convincing us that we should read the book instead. If you want to see a romantic movie with a heart-wrenching ending, there are many more that you can choose from. But if you, like me, are disappointed and a bit insulted with the outcome of this film, do yourself a favor and don't watch it. Because if you were dissatisfied with the framing Emerald Fennell had with this story, it's because you're deep down longing for something that has more meaning and real passion attached to it. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Bye bye!